Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission, scheduled for Tuesday, March 12th, 2024. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Colbert?
Here.
Mr. Kucera?
Here.
Mr. Nushai?
Here.
Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Tinlin?
Here.
Mr. Carpenter?
Here.
And Mr. Fitzer?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next item is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes they'd like to make in tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll let it stand the way it is, and I will approve it as it stands. Agenda item number 5 is approval of the regular meeting minutes from February 27, 2024. That'd be our last meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from January, what was the date?
February 27th.
February 27, 2024.
Support. Second.
And motion support. Anybody have any changes? No problems with it? May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
And Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion for items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close public discussion. And we'll move on to agenda number 7 is a site plan review for 602 North Rochester Road.
That's right, 602 North Rochester Road. So that's at the northeast corner of Rochester and Goodale. It's about a half-acre site, and it's occupied with a collision shop that's been there, I think, longer than the city has had a zoning ordinance. It's been there for a very long time. As has been noted in other recent applications, collision shops are permitted in the I-1 district, which this is. It's a special land use, and there's a separation standard from residential uses that's come up on 2 sites recently. This is a shop that was established prior to the adoption of the regulations. It's considered an existing nonconformity. It may continue to operate without further approvals so long as the configuration of the site and horizontal across the site extent of the use isn't changed. If the building square footage were to be increased, for example, special land use approval and a variance from the separation standard would be required at that time. The current application doesn't expand the footprint of the use. It's subject only to site plan review, which is triggered by the change of the facade. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're looking at the change in the facade that is caused by the addition of a new roof. So right now they have a flat roof, and they are proposing to add a new pitched roof to the building. You can see the building as it looks now in the photo on page 2 of the memo. I'm not proposing any other changes to the site at this point. There are a couple things that I noted on the drawing that were just like a little off from the way the building actually looks in real life, like the shape of one of the windows, and then there's a south-facing door on the front facade that doesn't actually show up on the elevations, but there's not a plan to change any of those things. I guess it's probably the rendering angle or something doesn't show that door. So looking around this site to the north and west across Rochester, you've got I-1 zoning. There's a collision shop to the north, and then industrial retail office, kind of a mix, like the Napa Auto Parts is across the street there on Rochester. To the south across Goodale, there's RM1 multifamily, and that's townhomes, and then to the east is R2 single family, and there's a single family home right there on the next lot. Looked at the building height. Obviously, they're changing the roof line, so that's one of the main things that's in play here. The maximum permitted building height in the I-1 district is 30 feet. The highest point on the proposed roof is 18 feet above grade, so they're meeting that standard. As for building materials, the building is primarily brick construction. The siding in the gables of the new roof is a metal panel. Rooftop screening, we noted that the equipment that's currently on the building isn't screened as required. And the plans note that that metal screening to match the new siding will be used to screen the appliances going forward. So as long as we're talking about the roof, that's a nonconformity on the roof, we're going to fix that and bring it up to code. And then the roof sign, too, the property currently has a non-conforming roof sign. When that sign's removed, it can't go back on the roof, so the applicant's been made aware of that and is kind of determining their course of action on signage. So that'll come in as a separate application at some point in the future, but they're aware of the inability to put the sign back on the roof. Do you have any questions for me?
Joe, do they have to come in front of us for a roof sign? I mean, like for a sign in general?
No, I mean, if
Yeah.
they do a wall sign or a monument sign or something, that can be approved.
And the current sign is on the roof?
It's on the roof, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, you can see it in the photo there on page 2. It's just kind of up at the north corner of the building, up there on the roof.
I see no problems. My simple question would be, why? Why change the roof? Is it leaking?
Well, it's a flat roof in Michigan, they always leak.
Would you have to, you can come on up
So
here.
that's the cause of the problem.
We've had 2 of them done in the past, and they don't last very long.
Yeah.
They last 10, 15 years at best. Yeah. This will be one and done, plus it'll look better.
I have no questions. Anyone?
I had a question, Mr. Chair. It's not clear to me, I mean, I see the roof, it's not clear to me where the downspouts are going to be placed. My only concern or question regarding the downspouts is because along the east side is a home very, very close to your building. And if you're putting downspouts right there, and, you know, where's the water going?
We're gonna bring it back inside through the building and put it in the existing ones that are inside now on the flat roof.
Okay. So these downspouts that are shown right now, they're interior downspouts?
There's a gutter that goes across the back of that building, but because of all the growth that's in there, you can never keep it open. It's a standard residential 4-inch gutter, and they plug, and we've had to cut the bottoms out of them to let them just drain. The roof, the way it's flat, there's a gutter there, but not much water goes off the back. It comes to the center of the building. There's 2 drains there, and there's 2 drains at the front of the building. It's had a couple additions over the years, you know, long before I was there, because it was a centerless grinding place and a heat treat plant that the neighborhood closed in the 50s or early 60s. And that's when, you know, my ex-father-in-law took it over and did what it is now. But yeah, we're going to bring them inside because the building is very close to the lot line in the back, and we took that into consideration.
Okay.
Yeah. Plus, it's you know, with that much water coming off the roof, you can't do it on the outside. It makes a hazard in the winter when it's, you know, when the water's freezing.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan for 602 North Rochester Road as presented.
Second. I have support on there?
Yep, second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Mr. Colburn? Yes. Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
We'll welcome your new roof in Clausen. Thank you. Agenda item number 8 is discussion of the short-term rental ordinance. Mr. Tangieri, I think, will walk us through this.
Up here. All right. So this has been a kind of on again, off again conversation for a while now. In 2022, City Council adopted a short-term rental ordinance that governs what most people refer to as Airbnbs or VRBOs, as companies that do the peer-to-peer rental of dwelling units. There's many others, HomeAway and a bunch of others, but those are kind of the two big ones. So we did include the full text of that ordinance in the packet. The ordinance defines some terminology relating to short-term rental units. It requires registration and licensing of those units in most circumstances, but not all. And we can get into details on that during discussion. It sets forth some requirements, including a maximum occupancy, like a ban on using fireworks or some quiet hours and things in there as well. And there are some enforcement and revocation procedures as well that go along with the registration and licensing requirements. So we were asked to look at some potential zoning regulations for short-term rentals that would work hand in hand with the other ordinance. And we've discussed it a few times. We've never actually come to any kind of resolution on it. In the meantime, that ordinance has been in force. And I've provided some zoning language here, kind of hoping to move this closer to adoption, and that's really what we're going to be discussing tonight. So we can kind of breeze past the first part of it, Article 2, definitions. So we're matching the definition of short-term rental from the short-term rentals ordinance in our zoning ordinance. So that's just taken word for word from the other ordinance and used here. Now, Article 3, district standards. This has been kind of one of the main parts of the conversation in the past because we've never quite settled on this. I've kind of put in a temporary or tentative bit of language here, but that's subject to change based on our discussion. It right now suggests making short-term rentals a permitted use in the R1, R2, and CR districts, subject to the standards established for them in Article 4, which are below. Down under other issues to consider, we talk about the other districts where residential uses are permitted. In general, they're multifamily uses, and those haven't been included in that Article 3 note, but that's, of course, something that we can discuss. Whether we want the 3 districts that are listed there, and then whether we want any of the other ones that aren't listed there to be listed there. As for the standards that have been pulled together for this, we have a kind of noticing posting requirement in a clearly visible location within the unit, that there's a notice and some copies or summaries of the local ordinances have to be posted. So they talk about, there's some actual references to ordinance there, nuisances, offenses against public peace and order, and solid waste. And then there's actually just a note that would go on the notice placard that you've got posted in your unit, that this unit is located in a residential neighborhood and the neighbors may not be vacationing. And then also just sort of a notice that neighboring property owners or tenants may contact the local agent and local police to report any issues relating to the property.
Joe, I'm sorry, but you're saying that would apply inside the home?
Yeah, exactly.
Inside the home, and it's in potentially RM1, RM2, CC, and...
Whatever districts we wind up deciding on, right now, that's what it says, yeah, is those 3 districts.
Okay.
The second requirement is that all parking has to be accommodated on site within a garage and/or on a paved driveway. That's one of the reasons that I didn't include any of the multifamily districts up in the Article 3 portion. The owner of the unit has to demonstrate that the site can accommodate one vehicle per 3 occupants at maximum occupancy. The other ordinance establishes how we determine maximum occupancy, so they would have to prove that they're able to accommodate that. A short-term rental property shall have a fenced rear yard. In order to preserve the essential character of neighborhoods in the city, short-term rentals shall be limited to no more than 2 units or 5% of the total number of detached single-family units on a block in residential zoned districts in the city, whichever is less. No short-term rental shall be located within 100 feet of another short-term rental. We had talked earlier about spacing and kind of aggregation limitations. So obviously we can discuss whether or not that's the actual target that you want, but that was something that was discussed earlier. This is similar to what Ferndale does, and also Oxnard, California has a very similar standard in their short-term rental ordinance.
What's the percentage, 5?
Yes, 5% or 2 units, whichever is less.
Per block?
Yeah, so if you have a huge block, you'd be at the 2, and if you've got a smaller block, you'd be at the 5%, which would probably limit you to 1. And then there's the 100-foot spacing standard as well. And then the 5th item there is just referring you to the short-term rental ordinance. Before we get into discussion, I just want to note this last paragraph here in the memo as well. An overall cap on the number of licenses available in the city with a built-in increase triggered when the cap is reached. Like 1 more permit becomes available the following year if the cap is hit. The cap on licenses has to be established in the general ordinance that establishes the licensing regime. So if you're requiring licensing in that general ordinance, that's where you have to say how many licenses are available. We can't do that in the zoning ordinance, so we'd have to tweak the other ordinance to make that requirement. This cap that we discussed previously was 10 per year citywide. And I think between that and the standard number 4 above, that would keep you from getting too many in any one part of the city. But of course, we can discuss whether or not we think standard 4 is spacing them out enough, and whether or not 10 per year is the right number. But that's more than we currently have based on checks on the various services that do this.
And do we know how many we have right now?
It's a little hard to say the actual raw number because they become available at different times of year. So when you search on, I did searches on Airbnb, I did searches on VRBO, and I did searches on HomeAway. And I tried to do 1 search per quarter so that you kind of get a spread of like different times of year. Because there are more units available in the summer is what I found than there are in the winter. But even in the summer, the most I ever found on a given service was 5 or 6 in a given week. And what I found is that if I searched on Airbnb and VRBO for the same weekend, the same properties were often listed on both sites. They're cross-listed. So it seems to be in the 5 to 6, and I don't know if any licenses have been pulled.
We have 5 registrations.
You have 5 registrations at the moment, so that seems to be about the number, is 5 or 6.
So I don't recall discussing a increase per year. Am I missing something? Is that something that we've discussed?
I don't recall the exact details of the last discussion. It was about a year ago. But that is something I've seen in other ordinances where if you get to the point where you're bumping up against the cap, you can expand the cap. And of course, you don't have to do that.
And
but
how many,
it's an idea.
how many homes do we have total? Do you know how many homes there are total in Clawson? I mean, 10 per year seems a little extensive.
The number of housing units, I can get that for you pretty
Okay.
quick.
And does that include single family and and multifamily, or is that just single family?
I should be able to get a breakdown here from
Okay.
SEMCOG.
Is registration required right now for short-term rentals?
Yes, and we can talk about the terms under which that's required in a second. I was like, hang on, I gotta get to the Clausen profile. So Clausen has a total of 5,881 housing units. And let me see how that breaks down. Single family, multifamily. So the number of single-family units is 4,616.
4,616?
Yep.
Joe, I have a question.
Sure.
In the ordinance itself, under D2, it says the dwelling unit must meet all applicable residential health department nuisance and safety codes as necessary to protect the safety of occupants. I remember the last time we talked about this, I brought kind of a concern up about this, but is there any inspection or anything that's done as part of the licensing to make sure that they're up to code?
Exterior, I believe. Only exterior.
Only exterior?
Yep.
Are there rental inspections currently in the city?
Exterior.
Like for rental, not short-term, but long-term rental?
Does the, yeah, the
There are?
city does
Yes.
inspections, yeah.
But they're only
Oh, it's only
exterior.
exterior?
Yes. So there's no assurance that there's, fire detectors, CO2 detectors, extinguishers, safe windows to escape. There's,
That's my concern.
right.
I think an inspection should, for long-term, should be talked about as well at some point.
I would agree. And are we up to date with allowing council to know that there's been multiple Supreme Court cases that have actually deemed short-term rentals as not a residential use? Or, I know that initially when this came in front of us, we were concerned about legislation coming down, about, cities being
Right.
able to zone.
Which never happened.
It didn't,
never
and there
moved out of
actually have been
committee.
cases from Supreme Court, citing on cities being able to deem them as not a residential use because of the transient use of those.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. I have a hard time personally with the lack of, we're not ADA compliant, we're not, making sure that there's safety in terms of fire escape, fire extinguishing. It can go on and on. I'm not feeling confident in the way our ordinance is written to allow them in residential at this time, personally.
Okay.
Joe, can we change those rules though, whether an interior inspection is required?
They can be changed. And council, of course, has to do that because it's a general ordinance. So I think that's something that, I don't know. Bryce, do you want to?
It is for council.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, if those are concerns that the planning commission has, I think those can be communicated to council, certainly. So what I'm hearing is that basically, safety protocols, you're concerned about safety protocols and whether or not they're going to be followed in these units.
Right, you're taking a residential house and making it into a commercial adventure. Therefore, I think you should be liable to city ordinances on buildings.
Right, and they already have those checks and
Force it that
balances
way.
on them, right? They already have the C of Os that are required.
Right.
It seems like a more aligned use with a commercial, where they're going in and making sure that the dwelling,
Yeah, it's a commercial use, so it should be treated that way, I think.
I would agree.
I seem to remember that this is part of what kind of tripped us up, is that, like, as far as the zoning is concerned, I think we're able as a body to get to something that we're comfortable with, as long as we're comfortable with the other ordinance. But we're not there with the other ordinance, is kind of what I'm hearing. So, I think from a process standpoint, and we can, obviously, if you want to, we can certainly discuss the language that we've got in front of us and maybe refine it a little bit, but from a process standpoint, I kind of wonder if maybe it makes sense to have some sort of communication to council indicating, what the hangup is here, which is obviously the safety stuff and the lack of inspection and other things. And then if that gets rectified in the other ordinance, then we're going to be more comfortable pulling together the zoning portion of it, I guess.
Or we can move it forward as a non-residential use.
Yeah, that is also possible. Just trying to think of. So if we list it as a use, I'm just trying to think of whether or not we can just deem it a non-residential use and it becomes subject to, I might be able to help with that, but.
Trying to build those mental gymnastics as well, but I'm not sure. So,
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if we can affect that change from here.
I don't, good evening. I think that may be a tall order because it would go into general ordinance more so than a planning or zoning ordinance, which would be obviously properly before you. That said, and I'm hearing the concerns, if you recall just the briefest amount of history, council shifted it when they passed the ordinances, administration felt that it was necessary to have something because we didn't have anything on the books as far as these short-term rentals were concerned. And council wanted to make sure that we had a registration process, we had an inspection process. There was some question as to our ability to go out there and perform an inspection. While I take, obviously, the statement at its face, and I, as a resident of this community, I agree with it, that we should have an inspection. When we get to interior inspections, it gets to be a little iffy. For example, the terminology that we use as far as, well, in commercial enterprises, we require a C of O. Well, when we build a home, we require that that home be built upon a building permit, that it follow all the laws, and at the end, a certificate of occupancy is also given, right?
Except for a change of use would trigger that again.
Well, but, that's a logical leap, and I don't dispute your logic, but practically, we have nothing that states that, right?
Yeah, we do.
Well, but you don't with respect to the short-term rental use, right? We don't, that's what we're debating, I think. That's what this body is talking about. So the point that I'm making, I suppose, is we would need to, I agree with the assessment, from Joe that maybe we do send a communication to council that this is one of the concerns, and then council can make the determination as to what they deem proper. If there is room, I mean, from a lawyer's perspective and nothing more, obviously you're entitled to your decisions and determinations here, but from a lawyer's perspective, I like the way that Joe has outlined his criteria. It sounds to me like it's a permissive use, but then the limitations are rationally related, and we dwindle down the numbers by rational relation to by rational limitations. And I think that's something that would always withhold in a court of law, right? Nobody can challenge us, because we can't zone something out of existence, right? Council has an ordinance that says this is a use, recognizing the use. Now we're talking about zoning as to where it may be proper, but we can't really say in zoning ordinance, by way of zoning ordinance, we can't say, well, we reduce it down to nothing. So I think I like the way that Joe has it outlined. Rational limitations based on how many do you have in a particular district, connection to one another, or distance from one another, so on and so forth. I think those make sense. If you got it to 10 or whatever it is, we're 5, 6, I think that makes sense to me, again, from a legal perspective as far as defending it.
But we have legal stance that would allow us to permit it in certain zones,
Sure.
right? So if we feel like it's more of a commercial use, there's nothing prohibiting us from deeming it as such.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any pressure on getting this thing passed through council? I mean, is there a line of people applying for these?
The
I think a couple of years ago,
got-
we had like one or two, and now you say we have 5 now, but there's no line of people trying to get into
No,
town to do this,
there
right?
isn't, and I think you alluded to it earlier. At the time, we were looking at these statutes that were being proposed at the state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on, it was my belief that we had to have something in our books. So that we had to get ahead of it so that it didn't open, I didn't want, obviously, for this community, floodgates as far as permissiveness was concerned,
Right.
right? So we had to have some limitation, and always, right, we would have to know what we have as far as what do we have in operation. So registration and inspection was, as far as I was concerned anyways, and council, I think, agreed with it. It was easy. It was an easy choice. But then council, of course, at the time said, well, okay, next step, deal with zoning. I think planning should be,
Right.
rightfully deal with zoning. No, so no, I don't know that we have anybody knocking at the door or anything like that. So time is not necessarily a factor.
Okay, thank you.
So, I guess my thought is at your next meeting, we could include in your packet a communication to council that tries to capture the concerns that we've talked about tonight, so that you can then read that communication and say, yes, this captures our concerns, and then that can be transmitted to council once you've all decided, yes, this captures it. Then we can kind of see where it goes as far as council is concerned, and bring it back here one way or another when council has, chosen their course of action. Does that sound like a reasonable?
That worked for me. How about everybody?
Can I give you a list of concerns?
I will be happy to record that.
Okay. Let's see, fire extinguishers, fire detectors, some type of awareness of rodent and trash refuge, stairs, porches, balconies, in terms of ADA and, integrity of the structure.
Escape routes.
Sorry, what?
Escape routes.
Escape routes, yes. Handrails, let's see, sidewalks and parking, making sure those are safe. Especially, I would think that the city, giving a license to operate something, would want some type of liability assurance when they're backing that. Proof of insurance, I didn't see anything in there regarding any type of proof of insurance for an operation or for fire. Making sure that there's no business operating out of that, or whether or not they want a business to be able to operate out of there, such as manufacturing, for lack of, depending on if it's residential or not, do they want home businesses to be able to come there and do photo shoots or, one-day things? How many groups are able to operate out of a short-term rental at a time? Let's see, making sure the number of bedrooms and people that are occupying that residence at that time or are within code. Parking,
That's actually covered in the general ordinance already. the
Is it covered?
occupancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
wondering if there's any type of registration for occupants, such as, license plate registration, driver's license. I know sometimes short-term rentals do require a verified ID, but I think for the most part, they're still allowing very much transient use. So those,
Well, I think they're kind of transient use by design. That's,
for sure, which is why they're more commercial than residential.
I don't know whether or not this goes to another item as far as inspection goes. I did have some friends that stayed at a short-term rental a week ago here in the city. There were items within the property that represented a fall risk, that is, like a cabinet could fall over on a child, or A table could fall over on a child easily.
So like
They were shaking,
unsecured
they were shaking their
furniture,
head
okay.
about, wow, I cannot believe how unsafe this is, you know?
And they put
I'm
a
like,
sign up
"Holy
there?
cow."
They
Huh?
put a sign there, or no?
No sign.
Oh,
No, it was just a short-term rental. They came down to visit their family and invited my wife and I over to this place. And there were items in the home that were so rickety and loose that they easily could fall over on a child.
Yeah.
And cause injury.
well, which to me, leaves me open to question about the risk that we have in actually giving a license, right? If something were to happen, or a fire in the neighbor's
Right,
house is
exactly.
damaged, or,
That's my concern, is the liability risk potential for the city.
and
if
the
something
residents,
happened.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, all these things we're talking about are pretty standard, like, safety features that are required with almost all other municipalities for, like, long-term rental inspections. So I'm, like, amazed that,
Right,
you know.
we don't have
We don't
anything?
have that, so. Easily
There's no
resolved.
occupancy there's no standard on that. I mean, you could essentially put people in a basement with some blow-up air mattresses and be compliant, without an escape route, right?
I think you would not be compliant with fire regulations, though, so.
But who's checking
Who's
those?
following up on that?
Who's looking at that? And really, the use in general just seems, especially when we consider the fact that, you know, our schools are wanting more families, and there's all these desires, you know, the housing market, the way it is, I feel like families should be in those homes versus corporations buying them and turning them into a commercial use.
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
However, it is legal for a corporation to buy a home.
It is, well, unless
So-
Michigan Supreme Court does say that we are allowed to regulate that.
That's true, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what we're here for. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, it would be best if local people were buying these units, but that's not necessarily always going to be the case. And in fact,
But we can have that's our, part of our job here as a planning commission is to steer that into
Right.
apply ordinances that guide those things that are core to our city, you know?
We're looking strictly at short-term rental right now, but even on long-term rentals in the city, I think if somebody bought a house and as a rental house, and rented it out, I don't know that they're even inspected inside of those. I think
Not
there's
at all.
strictly drive-by, look at the outside.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So it's kind of like buyer beware, or renter beware.
And I've heard residents that are long-term renters that say,
Yeah.
I wish there would be some kind of mechanism because, you know, they want to keep up on their properties. They take pride, but triggering the landlord to do something
And so you
has to
can't,
fall
you
on
can't
us.
do that on somebody that owns the house and they're renting it for a long time, so we're trying to put these demands on somebody that's doing a short-term thing. I like the idea of fire warnings and CO2 gas problems and things, and I think it should be enforced, but I don't see the city enforcing it on other houses either. So I don't know how we get past that. We can,
well, I mean, I
ask
think
for it,
that there may be
require
the
it.
potential to because of the differing nature of this use, you know, and there's so few of them. It's not like you've got to send someone out to 50 different properties, you know.
But we
You got
got to plan
5
for what
registered
if
things,
our,
you
like
know.
I've always said this about short-term rentals, we have a unique market in Clawson to where we're close to Royal Oak, we're close to Troy, we're close to Birmingham. We are the ideal place for something like that to really launch. So we need to be extra protective of our residents in a way that it doesn't matter if there's only 5 here now. We got to look at 20 years from now what that might look like, in especially allowing, you know, another 10% every year seems way extreme to me.
It's not 10% for
Or,
one
okay,
unit.
whatever just as a residential use, I mean, we have such limited residential homes available for families to fill. I really feel like it's not compatible with our use, it's not compatible with who we are as a city. I guess I've probably made my point.
to give you enough information to compile it and throw it back at us?
Yes. me see.
I mean, if we're allowed to regulate, if the state does give us the authority to regulate short-term rentals, are we allowed to just, would we be able to choose whether it's single-family, or would it have to be like all or nothing?
Yeah, you can make that determination. You can say this is only available in single-family homes, this is only available in multifamily project. Yeah, you can do that, I think, yeah.
As long as we don't zone it out completely and say it's
Right,
not allowed in
yeah.
any zone.
Yeah.
So Joe, I have a question on the multifamily. Those are normally apartments or whatever it is. Normally, do those landlords restrict short-term rentals for their lease agreements? Or is that kind of an open based on owner?
Most
Yeah,
landlords
some are.
probably would, not all, certainly. But most probably would. Most have restrictions on subleasing.
But not short-term rentals?
But you
so-
might have a landlord who decides like, oh, well, okay, I've got, 18 units, so I'm gonna make 2 of them short-term rentals, and they'll be the manager and owner of the short-term rental, and then the rest of their units are standard rentals. You could have a situation like that.
Okay.
And subleasing, like you said, subleasing is a big thing that, I've seen YouTube videos of, this is how you do it, and they essentially sign a sublease and then turn them into Airbnbs. So if there's no restrictions on there, I still think even in a multifamily, we would want to restrict out of respect for the families that might live in multifamilies, although it's more of a transient noise all the time kind of thing. And they are subject to further inspection than a residential. Is that correct, Joe? Like a multifamily, would they be subject to a further inspection in terms of fire extinguishers, smoke alarms, things like that? Are they regulated on it?
Well, to get their, initial C of O, of course, they've got to have all those systems in place. As far as like internal inspections.
Oh, no,
as
like
the
on an
units-
annual basis, every year they have to go through a safety inspection. No?
It's not an internal.
One-time shot, right?
Yeah, there's not an internal inspection of a unit or anything like that. no.
Can we recommend that for city council? Some type of, like, by the way, we were looking at long-term rentals as well, and maybe we can,
You can make a career job for an inspector.
I mean, the inspections aren't free. I mean,
Right.
they pay a fee for it. I mean, I've got several rentals, and it's, every one, it's like $150 a year.
right, you're
You know,
supposed to
it's,
sustain the mechanism that triggers it, right?
Yeah. It's good. I mean, it's a good thing. There's a lot of things they catch that I don't, and just for the safety of the tenant, but that's just how I view it.
Well, and just the integrity of the city. Like, I know Warren's gotten very strict over the time with putting these standards because they've been subject to, like, so many landlords that just let things fall apart. So for the city in general to keep an integrity to it in our housing, I think it's very important, very much so.
Okay, well, I know what I got to do next, and I'll bring that back to you.
Okay, then we'll we'll move along then to agenda item number 9, which is a discussion of the planned unit development ordinance language.
Yeah, so,
Our favorite things here.
real quick on that, I included a little thing to kind of show you, this isn't the actual letter itself, because they resubmitted now and all the numbers have changed. But I just wanted to show you how I'm going to be presenting the information about the RM2 district and the CC district and what's being proposed, and kind of trying to make it clear, like, where they're deviating from the standards of a given district, but not the other one. And the idea is at the end of the letter is that there's a summary of here's where they don't meet RM2 and here's where they don't meet CC standards, and that table and any modifications you might make to it in your discussion with the applicant kind of becomes the thing that you can cite in a motion, and if you're inclined to approve it, then it would go right into the development agreement. But I just wanted to kind of give you a little preview of, yes, we're giving you all that information, and here's how we're organizing it, And just trying to make it clear, like, all right, so in the CC district, this is the standard, they're meeting it. In the RM2 district, this is the standard, they're not meeting it, and here's how they're not meeting it, so. Yeah, I don't know that I've got anything else on that right now, but,
So Joe, our multifamily standards don't, I see that you included efficiencies here, but we don't, aside from parking, we don't require outside of that, how many 1 versus 2 bedroom versus 3 bedrooms, right?
no.
Right, okay. And then I know, was there anything that we needed to discuss further with like Rennis and Nick, or?
At this time, I'm not sure. I mean, if you've got any questions, we can certainly answer them.
I have a quick question. So you said that, I see that you have a table, and that table is great and very helpful, love it. It says requirement in CC, requirement in RM2. I read through the ordinance, I confess to be a little confused. Which standard really should we be applying in the PUD, right?
So that's kind of the tricky thing, is that you have to apply the RM2 standards to a multifamily use per the ordinance. However, you're in the CC district, and that's your base district for the development, so you can't ignore the CC standards. Because the city center district has a lot of like building composition standards and materials standards and things that aren't present in the RM2 district. So we can't just like not look at those because then I guess for one thing, it comes down to just the character of the area. We have to make sure that the building is looking like it belongs in the city center district, and that means meeting the standards of the city center district. So we really have to look at both sets of standards.
Okay.
And that's why I'm trying to kind of like show them all together so that we can say, all right, they deviate from this one in this district, but in this district they're okay. And then on the next standard, it's the opposite. They deviate from the other district and they're okay in the original district. Yeah, sure.
And then I think that confusion, I think everyone kind of had because it is a little unclear. But based on the last PUD that is across the street next to the library, I think that when this language is written, they needed to have some type of multifamily residential language to fall back on if the underlying zoning district didn't have standards for multifamily. So that property across the street is zoned Office 1, O1 Office Service. So there's not general standards on multifamily that they have in that district. So I believe the intent was to have some type of multifamily residential standards to use if they're using a PUD. It's just not exactly clear in the ordinance that if there are standards for multifamily in a district, that, that's what would be the by right development. Does that make sense?
That does
Yeah,
make
except
sense.
for that's not, when we're talking city center, you link RM1, RM2 to city center. So the standards we follow automatically are RM1, RM2 standards. And the PUD actually says that if you're using an RM1, RM2 standard or type of use, the use triggers that type of standard. And that is also followed by the RM1, RM2 district saying the multiple family dwellings are subject to the following conditions. So like there's multiple layers of language in our ordinance that says we are to adhere to an RM1, RM2 standard. In a PUD, in city center, in whatever area we're at. At least my interpretation.
So I think I said this back in the fall. When we're done with the master plan, I really want to look at the PUD ordinance and make sure that it's doing what we want it to do. Because right now, I kind of get the sense that like it's not really doing what we necessarily want it to do. So I think that's going to be like a project
But
later
what do we
this
want
year
it to do,
is-
though? Well, I guess
Well,
that's a bigger
that's
discussion
kind
than
of
here.
the bigger discussion,
But-
yeah.
But really, 54 efficiencies, is that based on their newest numbers or their previous
That's
numbers?
not their newest numbers, no.
That's
The
not-
new- The
I'm
newest
sure it
numbers
went
came in
up.
after this packet went out,
So it's probably more like 68 efficiencies.
No,
or-
I don't
it's
want to
probably
talk
got-
about them yet until we
No,
have the
we're not,
numbers,
yeah,
right?
there's no
Right,
point in
But just
talking
in
about it
general,
now.
in
Do we want
general, I want to know what
60%
we can,
efficiencies?
I want to know what we can consider, right? What can
Right.
we, what standards should we be looking at? And I know that we can relax on them if we choose to do so.
Right.
But I like how you point this out, but RM1, for example, isn't on here, right?
Well, but it
In the ordinance-
specifically
well, the ordinance
references
references
RM2.
RM1.
Well, the PUD-based standards specifically say RM2. So
Okay,
that's what we're going
So
with.
the idea is trying to come to a point where we're presented with a plan.
Right.
These are the deviations from what our ordinance suggests we should be allowing,
Right.
right? And they're asking us to waive those because they're a PUD. That's what the process is, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
knowing precisely where those deviations are is important, and knowing how to find those is important, right? That's what I want to get to.
Exactly, yeah.
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 And what is this benefit to the city itself?
Right.
Giving those?
Right,
What are you
exactly.
giving me
Yeah,
that
because
What
you're
are we
not
adding in
just
return?
allows
waiving
me
it for
to
nothing.
waive those, right? What do we get,
Right.
right?
We get a lack of 5 parking spaces, but a bicycle rack.
So Joe, back to the original question, what is the exact, in writing, black and white, not what we want to change in the future for what we use? Is it RM2?
Yeah.
In
so
the
it-
exact writing.
It points to RM2 in the language, right. And then the thing is, we also have to apply these city standards, city center
And where does that
standards.
say it in writing?
So, well, it's later in the ordinance. There's some stuff in the Article 6. I can probably try to actually cite this language.
Oh, that's okay.
That talks about I can't remember what the land wording is, but at any rate, we need to make sure that we're applying those standards for like building composition and other things. And that's, so one of the deviations that they're asking for is to not do the liner use, the commercial liner use along the whole ground floor. And that's a city center standard. They would typically be required to do it in that location. If you only apply the RM2 standards, then that isn't actually an issue. But I think that, and I will cite the language that I found that suggested to me that we also need to apply the city center standards.
But also CC takes them off that parking lot requirement, right, the hook there? It's not required in the city center, and also they also want to use a different type of fencing in the back too.
Well, no, they've actually got a masonry wall now.
Okay, all right.
But that's just, that doesn't give them right by use. That doesn't give them a right. That gives us the right as a planning commission, at least from my understanding, to give variance to those different asks. Is that right, Joe? Am I?
It is ultimately your decision.
Well, I'm saying in chapter 6, that doesn't say, hey, you can apply city center if you want to. That's not talking about to them, the developers. That's saying, should the planning commission see fit, we can allow for variance in that use, the RM1, RM2 use, to applied standard at CC, right? Like, that gives us
Yes.
the ability to give a variance.
Yes, you have the ability to give that consideration.
But they don't have that consideration by right.
No, they would if they were doing a conventional development,
Correct.
but as a PUD.
But even as a conventional, it still triggers an RM1, RM2 standard. If they came in and had a
No.
liner.
No, because we're leaning on the specific language of the PUD, that you have to apply the RM2 standards.
So what if a city
CC
center
district.
wanted to build nothing but multifamily? They can't do it.
Of course they
No, because they wouldn't be able to do it without the liner use.
They wouldn't be able to do it without the liner. In what standard of RM1, RM2 would we apply to the rest of the unit?
You wouldn't.
We would apply the RM1, RM2 standard that's in our ordinance, correct?
Without further studying it. I don't want to be
We're
too
talking a lot of
categorical.
hypotheticals, I think, it's just.
Well, it's important
understand,
because
but
that's the only
yeah,
standard, when you
those
say that
applicants are
city.
not here. I don't think it's fair to talk about this.
Okay, well, hypothetically is what we're speaking, right? So hypothetically, a city center use of RM1, RM2 multifamily, our guidance would be RM1, RM2's ordinance. If they came in front of us with a commercial minor use.
Yeah, I don't think you'd apply the standards for the RM1 and RM2 because those are specific to the RM1 and RM2. The general standards for multifamily that precede those subclauses, I think probably would apply. But
Where are those, you said that there's standards that precede those?
it's section 4.3 or something like that, I think. There's 3 basic subsections to section 4.3. There's one that's general standards for multifamily, there's one that's standards for RM1, and there's one that's standards for RM2.
So where are the standards for city center?
There aren't any in that section.
So-
So the general standards would apply.
Okay, that's a long way of getting back to what I said, but okay. So we rely on RM1, RM2.
No, we don't. Those are specific to the RM1 and RM2. We rely on the multifamily standards that are general to all multifamily.
Within the city.
Right, exactly. And then those standards apply in RM1 and RM2, but there are specific standards for the RM1 and the RM2 districts that only apply in those districts.
Okay.
But this will be back in front of you, this project will be back in front of you at the next meeting. So this letter will be all updated and complete, and we will see it again then. And there's no action to take, so there's no motion or anything on this agenda item.
Yeah, it's strictly discussion tonight. Any other questions that we can? Yeah, it kind of feels like we're talking about a specific thing, but this should be an overall general discussion tonight. We shouldn't be heading in that direction. If we're done with this discussion, then we'll have to move on to other business. Do we have any other business going on?
I have one question, if I may, for administration. I saw driving north on Main, the new Irish pub or Gus Snug or whatever it's called. I saw that on the south side wall, they have a mural now, or
Yeah.
did you guys have a permit for that?
Yeah, we approved that.
Did we?
You did, yeah,
I
you did. You approved it.
As a body.
You weren't here.
Sorry.
We voted for you.
Thank you.
They put the
Did I
big,
vote yes?
Yes.
We covered you, Laurent.
they put the
Thank
big
you.
bird on the side of the building, and they have artwork on the front,
Yes.
near the door. We approved that.
I saw the artwork, it was interesting, and I'm like, wow.
You said you liked
Apparently
it
I
last
voted for
time.
it.
And apparently Grand River Brewery's roll-up doors have been installed. So they're getting ready for the weather here.
I voted.
Do we have anything on the planners report?
Nothing further.
Nothing on planning. Staff report and training opportunities.
All right, good evening, everyone. Got beat to the punch on a couple of those updates with Grand River and Gus's Snug. But just wanted to remind everyone that the ethics disclosure form is due April 15th. I believe we have 3 of them so far, so we still need to get that completed from 6 of you. Again, the Oakland County and the Michigan Association Planning are hosting an in-person workshop on April 29th from 3 to 8 p.m. So in order to meet the deadline, I registered for 3 people. I know we had 1 confirm yes. Is there anyone else that would like to attend that event? If not, we're able to get 1 refunded, and I would like to go as well, but if 3 of you want to go, I can certainly drop my
I don't want to take your
remote
place,
op-
but I'd
No,
be
no, no.
interested.
If you want to go, we'll definitely encourage you to go. So
Is there a remote option?
it's all in person, but there are a ton of other remote options for training opportunities throughout the state. I will follow up with some of those upcoming ones to see what fits in your schedule as we head
I
into the
just,
summer.
I can't
Yeah.
go at that time.
Understand. So is that a for sure confirmation? Do you want to go, or do you want to touch
Yes.
base via email?
No, I do. I thought I emailed
Okay.
you, so I obviously didn't. But
Okay.
yes, please.
So we have Mr. Tinlin, Ms. Redmond. Is anyone else interested in attending? I know it's during the workday, so it's probably difficult for some of you. All right. All right.
So
Locked
you're
in.
going, right?
Yes.
All right.
I mean, unless there's a last minute
Okay.
change, we have until then. And then just a couple items I didn't have in the report that I wanted to touch on. I believe we're aiming to present the capital improvement plan to the board during the first meeting in April. I believe that's April 9th. So you can anticipate that being presented. And then one additional thing I wanted to bring to your attention, in that honestly probably would have not been noticed by anyone because the masons on the project did such a good job matching the brick to the existing brick. So over the last week at 701 South Main Street, on the corner of, I believe it's Bauman and South Main, there's a dentist office doing a build-out interior alteration there. And they removed a window on the front-facing part of the building and moved it from the left of the door to the other side. So there's still two windows on the front of the building, but the zoning ordinance specifically states that any new movement or installation of a window triggers site plan. And so that work has been done. They didn't intentionally do it to go around the ordinance. They just thought they were filling a window and moving it. They had the same coverage done, but they are completing a site plan application, so that will be in front of you soon.
Yeah, that's 701 South Main.
Correct.
What's on the upcoming site plan you have listed here for 502 South Main?
So,
Is that CNC maybe? or-
yes, that is CNC Bump Shop, the former CNC Bump Shop.
I'm getting all kinds of rumors. Any confirmation of what's going in there?
It is all conceptual right now. They are preparing the site for remediation, doing some interior demo work. Everything is permitted. We were actually there yesterday, walking through the site with the new owner, and they should have their site plan to us this week. So hopefully that'll be on April 9th as well.
Okay, good. Has the tank's been pulled, do you know?
Well, the tank was pulled. That's why it's on Eagle's list of contaminated sites.
It was pulled. They tried pulling it years ago and put it back.
Yeah, that's why it was contaminated. So they're doing the remediation in April with their environmental contracting company, and then Eagle, which is the state's.
Okay, I'll be looking forward to them doing something to that building.
Yeah,
Hopefully keep the architecture the way it is.
I don't want to allude to anything, but I think everyone's going to be really happy to see what's going to be going in there.
And Nick, real quick and if you don't know right now, it's okay. But on remediation, is there certain standards of remediation based upon the future use? Or is it just a standard, like, this is what it takes to make it clean kind of thing?
So it is typically based on use,
Okay.
and this use is just going to be for a commercial type use.
Okay.
They will be using the existing building, but their environmental company has been working with Eagle to make sure they're following all of those guidelines. I'm certainly not an environmental engineer, but we'll be in recipient of all those documents before they do the work, just to double check everything. But I know that the environmental company they do this very frequently in the area.
And does that trigger like a future change of use? I know typically on commercial, as long as you're doing a conventional lending, you're getting an environmental anyway, but like in the future, if it changes use, does that also trigger a different environmental? Do you know?
I can't speak on that right now.
Okay.
I know that the remediation they're doing is compliant with what they're going to be
Okay.
hoping to do on that site.
Okay.
So if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All good? All good. Legal update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening again. Just briefly, I wanted to update you because with respect to DDs, I know some questions were asked, obviously, over the course of time with respect to developments there and some of the work that had been done. Administration, we filed a complaint at the Oakland County Circuit Court and against deeds with respect to some of the work that had been performed. We did enter into an agreement with them. They made an offer as far as resolving all the issues that we had raised in the complaint. That, council went into closed session, considered those issues, made a counter offer to Dede's, which ultimately was accepted, and a judgment was entered. So now we have obviously a consent judgment that governs what transpires there. In that consent judgment, there are all the things that you could conceivably imagine as far as the work that they need to do. They're going to deal with that back parking lot. They're going to deal with some stormwater solutions. They're going to have to apply for permits, obviously, for all the work that retroactively for permits for the work that they perform. So it looks like we finally have it channeled appropriately to be able to get some of that work that was performed, perhaps on the cover of night, or at least without permit, to finally be done properly.
And will they be coming back in front of us on the planning commission?
No, the way consent judgments operate, unfortunately, it does skip over the planning commission, because then council takes over the authority for settling a matter such as that on account of their authority as the body in the
And
city.
will they at least comply to all the requirements that we laid on Tribal Fair when they were there? The last time we did a site plan on that, the site plan was never approved on that building, even for Tribal Fair it wasn't.
So now the consent judgment governs, and it is about as thorough as council wanted it to be. And I think it covers, it's fairly holistic, so I think you would be satisfied upon review.
Okay, so council can look at this one, they'll sign off on the site plan.
Yes, sir.
And that would trigger another C of O at that point and hold them compliant to the new site plan essentially, right? Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any final comments before we close down here? Any questions? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn then.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion support, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Scott? Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Nushai?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Mr. Colbert? Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think you said my name.
Sorry.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, you did a lot on there.
Glasses, and I think they're staring at me right there.
The glasses?
Thank you, Bill.